My name is Joanne Sanchez. Today is October the 11th, 2000. I am at the home of Pete and Theresa Casarez, and I just interviewed Pete Casarez, and now I'm going to be interviewing Theresa Casarez, um, and this is for the U.S. Latino and Latino World War II Oral History Project. Thank you, Theresa, for um, interviewing with us. And I'd like to ask you the same question that I asked Pete, to tell us about some of the favorite experiences of your childhood.
Well, I can say that I always enjoyed singing and dancing since I was a small child. And at the Cinco de Mayo and 16 de Septiembre fiestas, my mother always, uh, she always helped me to learn how to say the poesías, poetry in Spanish, and to let the people know what the meaning of the Cinco de Mayo and 16 de Septiembre meant. And of course, nowadays it has turned, those fiestas have turned into dances. And a lot of the people that attend those fiestas don't know what the meaning of the special days are. But she always made sure that I would have a new one for every year. And this started since I guess I must have been around 6 or 7. And then um, I learned how to sing and I learned how to dance. And so those were two special days in my life because we had no other kind of entertainment, and uh, people look forward for the to go to the fiestas, and we look forward in putting on the big show.
Did she send you to lessons, or did she teach
No,
you
no,
herself?
she had brought those poesías from Mexico, and she kept them all the years. And My other sisters and brothers, I don't believe that, I don't remember her saying that they learned any of them, but I was, I guess, I was pretty sharp at remembering poesías. And
Do you remember any of them still?
oh well, I remember some, and in fact,
Do you
I
want to
was
share one?
well. I was gonna mention that um, I I was at some at a gathering just this past month, and I saw a lady that I hadn't seen in years, and she said that she remembered when I was in a Christmas fiesta, and I could not have been maybe 5 or 6 or maybe just 5 years old, and this lady that was in charge of the fiesta, she also taught me a poesía in Spanish, and this lady was mentioning that she said, I always think about that particular poesía that you used to say, and and yes, I remember that, and now the ones that my mother taught me were pretty long, very detailed, to explain the holiday and the why we celebrated the Cinco de Mayo. Now was uh, this was because of Christmas, and it wasn't a very long one, and yes, I still remember that. Uh, as a little girl, I walk out on the stage with a doll, and I say, "Esta es mi bella Mimi. ¿Con quién juego yo? Es el mejor regalo que Santa Claus me dio. La visto y la peino y le doy su café. La saco a pasear en coche o a pie. Me la dan, a voice says from the distance. No, no, no. Esta es mi bella Mimi. And I never forget that, and I always think about that. And every year they'd give me a doll. They'd give me a doll because I'd go and say that little poem. uh, but
Tell me about your parents. Where were they from? What were they like?
okay,
Describe
my
each of them.
my father and mother. My father's name was Alonso Herrera, and he was born in Villa Juarez, Coahuila, Mexico. My mother's name was Zoila Rivera, and she was also born in Villa Juarez, Coahuila, Mexico. And they came to the States, and they had no children when they came to the States. All of my brothers and sisters were born in the United States. My father was, he worked on a farm in Bergstrom. And my mother was just a housewife. She enjoyed cooking, and she cooked for the hired hands, and she did all of the housework and the washing and all. And they moved here to Austin when I was 11 months old. And my father, at that time, uh, it was during the Depression that my father started working for the WPA, and he worked in a cannery that they had here. They used to can meat and food to pass out to the people because uh, there were no jobs. People were hungry, and he worked there for several years. And my mother, of course, she stayed at home. She took care of the house and all. And after that, my father, the last, he worked odd jobs. And the last job that he had was when they started building the Bergstrom Air Force Base. Because the man that was in charge of the plumbing was a good friend of his from way back. So he was the contractor there. So when he came into Austin, the man lived in Corpus Christi. He came into Austin, and he offered my father a job. And at that time, he and his wife moved in with us. As Pete was mentioning, in those days, people just piled up, they didn't, they never said no to anybody that needed a place to sleep. And so my father, that was his last job, working at Bergstrom Air Force Base, helping putting in the plumbing. And I never forget that, so many people in those days were piled up in two families, or maybe some families. There were three families living in homes, in a different home, in the same home, because they didn't have the money to pay for the rent. And I remember that there was always someone coming to the door asking for something to eat. And my mother never sent anyone away without giving them what little bit we had. And those were sad times of growing up during those days for me and for my family. And I do remember that she was always mending clothes and putting buttons on clothes. So if anybody came by the house that needed any clothing, she was always giving them whatever she had that she had repaired. And even in her later years, when she and my father used to go visit family in Mexico, she always made sure she mended anything that maybe the family didn't want it, or maybe the buttons were gone, and she always would take it to Mexico to make sure that somebody that needed it would get it. And those were hard times. They really were.
Tell me about your siblings, your brothers and
Okay,
your sisters.
my oldest sister, Frances, she by nature was a good seamstress. She always would sew, get any. My mother used to tell me she'd get any little piece of scrap and make dresses for her doll when she was small. And in later years, they didn't have any schooling. My older brothers and sisters didn't have any schooling. They all worked. And she worked for this lady. Her name was Bryson. Her husband had a lumber company on 19th Street and where the drag is, right as you go into the drag on 19th Street. And this lady would hire uh, several women, uh, and they would make up the clothing that was sold at Scarborough's, at E.M. Scarborough's downtown. And of course, I don't know whether you're acquainted with Scarborough's, but in those
I remember
years,
the building, and I
yes,
remember it right
yes,
when it was closing.
yes, in those years, a very exclusive store, and this lady would sell her clothing to Scarborough's, and my sister was one of the seamstress for her, and through the years, if I'd see a dress in some window, and I'd say, "Oh, I saw this beautiful dress at a certain window at Scarborough's or at Yarns or wherever." She'd go and take a look at it through the window, and she'd say, "Buy me 4 yards of this and 5 yards of that," and she would make up the dress for me. I never did know what it was to go and buy a dress, and so she was very instrumental in making sure that I had my clothing for school, and that was my oldest sister. We called her Chita. My next sister, her name was Leonor, and we called her Nora. And she also worked for the WPA. Now her job was also sewing, but they used to sew clothing for the people that needed their clothing to go to work, or for the families, and they used to use a lot of denim. I remember in those days, nobody wanted denim because they knew that it came from the WPA sewing room. And that's what they used to do. They used to make the dresses, and then they'd make the men's denim shirts so that they could work, and she did that for a long time. And she also, there was the chili factory here in Austin, and both she and Nora worked there for a little while. Not Chita and Nora worked there for a little while, not for too long, but they also were, they were called to go work there because one of their friends that was looking for help called them, but they didn't stay there too long, but they did work there. And it was I think that was on West 5th. The Ostex, I think they called it Ostex Chili Company. Mm-hmm.
How long was it in town?
Oh, they was in town for many years. It was for many years, and they used to call it la chileria. That's what everybody knew. Trabaja en la chileria. But but anyway, both of them were. They worked out of the house. And then there was my oldest brother, Abdon, and people knew him as Phoebe. Phoebe, he he was married, and he had uh, he had 5 children, and well, I guess I'll back up. Phoebe, growing up, as I mentioned earlier, they didn't have much schooling, but he got a job delivering Western Union telegrams. And that's what he did since he was about, I guess, about 14 or 15 years old. He used to ride a bicycle, and he used to go and deliver the telegrams. I'll not forget that one year he came very excited because he had gone to deliver a telegram out. He'd say the country, but then anything that was beyond 45th Street was the country here anyway. And that the family was having their Thanksgiving dinner, and they invited him in to have dinner. He always mentioned that. Of course, we didn't know what turkey was, in our home at that time. And he worked for Western Union for many, many years, and he retired from there. And later on, he went into the working with gravel trucks. He worked with gravel trucks, and he did that for a few years, heavy equipment. And but he was called into the service. He was drafted. He had 5 children, and he was drafted. And he was in the Normandy invasion. And thanks be to God that that he survived that. And after he went through that, he went to the Rhine, where they had those battles and all. And then he was an MP and sent to Paris whenever uh, whenever they had the occupations there in Paris. He served there in Paris for a number of years. Well, not many years, but for a few years before being discharged. Hmm. The next one was my sister Pauline, and of 7 children, she and I are the only ones living. She lives in Corpus Christi. Now, Pauline married in 1935 and moved to Corpus Christi. Now, she never worked. She was a housewife always. But her husband, when the Naval Air Base in Corpus Christi was being built, I'll not forget, I had to have been like in junior high, and he wanted to apply for a job, but he did not know how to write in English. So he went to the base and he brought the application, and I filled it out. Imagine the writing. I wish I had a copy of that. But anyway, he never forgot that I had filled out the application for him. But he was a very intelligent man. He got many awards while working for the government there, and because he was very mechanically involved in every job that he had, and he was able to prepare different kind of gadgets that would save the government money. And some of the things that he would see things that he figured, we are spending too much money for this, we can do it this other way. So my sister has many citations that he received because of that. And on the side, he was also a body man. And when he retired, he continued to have a body shop there at the house. And he passed away 3 years ago. The next one is my sister Zoila. She passed away in '98, and she worked for the county health department for a while, and and then she became a notary public, and she did most of her work at home. Now she was in charge of the fiestas of the 16 de septiembre and Cinco de Mayo. She used to play the piano, and we used to sing, and as I had mentioned to you earlier, used to dance. Always used to dance the jarabe. Now when I hear it, my feet start, you know, never forget those steps, you know. And anyway, she used to be in charge of the fiestas, and then there were fiestas, you know. People look forward to those 2 year to those two fiestas a year because that's all we had, and that was at Zaragoza Park. And she directed the choir, and then, as I said, she used to play for the dancers, and uh, but she did that for many years. And after her, there was my brother Raul, which people knew as Ralph. I don't know where he got that name, but everybody knew him as Ralph. Now he also went to the service. He was in the Air Force, and he served in the Pacific. I don't have the exact uh, place where he served because I never did get a copy of his discharge, but his daughter will be sending me that, and that will indicate where he was, and he died very young. He was 50 years old. He lived in California. After the service, he moved to California, and he was in the upholstery business there, and then there's me.
So you're the baby?
I'm the baby of the family. Yes.
I am too. Now you moved from Bergstrom to Austin when you were.
I was 11 months old when my parents
oh,
moved to Austin.
okay.
So
You don't
I
know.
say, I tell everybody that I'm really from here because I knew nothing different except Austin.
What was old Austin like?
Well,
back
to
then?
me, old Austin was a big town. And as Pete had mentioned before, there was we called them streetcars. And we used to live on East 6th Street, 1305 East 6th. And the cars would run from Congress Avenue to Chicano and turn there, and they'd go in front of the house, you know, in front of our house. And so we'd sit there and watch the people go, you know, get in the streetcar, and then they'd go and make the turn. Or that went as far as the end of the line, which was Chicano, which is right in town, would get off, and some would come back and get off on the other streets, coming back, you know. And the thing I always liked about Austin was that everything was downtown, like in most towns. The downtown was where all the stores were, and you could go down there, and we'd go and do window shopping. There wasn't much money. There wasn't any money, but we'd go and do window shopping in the evenings, and people would walk down the avenue and without no concern whatsoever, and you know they'd go, and you just meet everybody downtown because they were walking downtown just to go window shop and see what was in the windows. And in those days, they would you know, they had all the main stores, of course, were downtown. What was we had, like, of course, Scarborough's was the store then, and then there was the Yorins and T.H. Williams, and there were other big stores, J.C. Penney, and all of those stores were downtown, and so that's where we would meet most of the people. And there was right on the corner of 6th and Congress, there was this old building, and that's where the Woolworth store was built after that building was knocked down. That building was like it was like the headquarters to the streetcars. You know, people would go in there and they could go and buy tokens because that's what you'd use to get into the streetcar. And that was their main office there, right on the corner of across from the Littlefield building on the west side of Congress and 6th Street, across from Scarborough's. And uh, I don't know, Austin, you could get around. Nobody could get lost in Austin because the streets were first, second, third, fourth, fifth. I mean, there was no way you could get lost. And and then the streets, vertical, they were all rivers, you know, Colorado, Brazos, San Jacinto, and all that. So people, they found their way easy in Austin in those days. And it was, you know, it was so different than it is today. Now you go and you don't recognize the buildings anymore. They've knocked down most of our old buildings and places that we used to go to. Of course, they still have the Paramount and the State Theater, and those were there back then. And we used to have a Capitol Theater on West 6, half a block in from Congress Avenue, and there was the Queen Theater that was on Congress Avenue and 7th, and that's where we used to go, you know.
How did your parents maintain traditions from Mexico? What
Well,
sorts of traditions did they keep?
I would say that in those days, people, like Pete was saying about about Grandma Casarez tradition, you know, always the day of the Virgen de Guadalupe, of course. I mean, that was a big thing in our home, and then of course Christmas, and there were always tamales. I don't know, and I think back as limited as we were in food in those days, there were always a few tamales, not an abundance, but everyone got to eat tamales. Now, my mother enjoyed baking. She didn't bake cakes, but she baked all kind of cookies and all kind of pastries, Mexican, and so we always look forward to the holidays because of that. There never was, you know, presents for Christmas. You know, they just weren't. Now, I always have told everybody in the family that my sister Frances was my Santa Claus because she always managed to see that I got something for Christmas, you know, even if the others didn't get anything, since I was the youngest, I guess. But there weren't presents under the tree like, you know, like not nowadays. Children have Christmas every day, and it was different then. And but we always, I always remember my father talking about la canícula. Do you know what that is? Well, during the summer, starting July the 14th through August the 24th, it was a belief of theirs that if it rained on July the 14th, we were going to have a wet summer. If it didn't rain that day, it was going to be a dry summer. I always talked about it. And in fact, I have one cousin, only one first cousin that's still living, and we were talking the other day, and we were talking about that, and she said, yes, I mean, her family formed, and they very much believed in that, you know. And also, uh, Las Cabañuelas, do you ever remember hearing about that?
No. Tell me
Okay.
about it.
Okay. From what I can remember, uh, they said that, like, starting January the 1st, uh, the first day of January is January, the second day of January is February, and that's the way the weather is going to be. So it's going to go all the way through December, and then it's going to come back, you know, and it's going to keep coming back from December to January again, and then they're going to double, and then they're going to triple, and then that's the way it is. And then by the last day of January, it's supposed to be a combination of all the weather or the seasons of each month. You know, of course, I can't recall that I can remember that it ever happened. But like in January, well, of course, it was going to be very, very cold. And the second day, the second day of January, February is cold. And then March, very windy. And April, well, the sun is out. And May, a lot of rain. And that was their belief, you know. Mm-hmm.
Tell me about your school years. Where did you go to school? How did you get to school?
Okay.
What was the school like?
I'll not forget that there was a little school on Third and Comal, and they called it Comal School. That was the only people that went there were Mexican Americans. That was it. But then that was in very similar to Our Lady of Guadalupe School, because that was the neighborhood. And my sisters, uh, Pauline and Zoila and Raul went there, and it was the last year they had like a little kindergarten of some kind, and I got to go there for maybe for a very, very limited time. My first grade, I went to Bickler School, which was located where the Marriott Hotel is now. That was Bickler School. They knocked that school down when they built this hotel. So I used to walk, you know, all the way to 11th. That was 11th, and it was East Avenue, the street. We had no expressway. There was a park all the way in the middle of the from the river all the way up to about 14th or 15th Street. There was a park in the middle, and on either side it was East Avenue. And then I have not thought to check the signs to see if they still call it East Avenue, because I don't know why they call it Frontage Road now, but that was East Avenue. Anyway, I went there in the first grade. The second grade, being of the boundary where I lived, I was sent to Palm School. And so I went to elementary school at Palm, when Palm was on East First and East Avenue. The building is still there, and I believe that it's they have veterans offices there, veteran services there, and I don't know what other kind of offices, but the building is still standing there. And from there I went on to John T. Allen Junior High, and then to Austin High.
Did you feel that any of these schools were segregated, or were you treated differently as a Mexican American?
Well, I don't know whether this was something in us or what, but I didn't feel it like my sister Pauline, that was visiting with me here about 2 weeks ago, we were talking about that, and she said that, you know, they always felt segregated there at Bickler, because she did get to go to Bickler school. She said, you know, we took whatever there was at home for lunch, and of course there was always tortillas, and we'd take them and we'd hide them, and they would laugh at us because we were eating our tortillas, but then that was all there was, you know. And I said, yes, but now even Taco Bell sells them.
Now they're in.
Yes, and I used to tell my friends, you know what, my great grandparents are probably turning over because, you know, where I worked at the cafeteria, they were selling breakfast tacos, and I said, never would they have thought in their lives that they would be selling breakfast tacos in a federal building anywhere. But anyway, I think the reason that I went to Palm was because my parents lived in the area that they lived, where we were very few Mexican Americans there. It was a predominantly Anglo, from Congress Avenue to I'd say to like Waller Street, and even further down, because some of the students went to med school, but that was all white territory there also. But the few of us that went to school there, it just sort of stuck together. And we just you know, didn't even think about mixing. In those days they stayed over there and we stayed over here, you know. But I don't remember ever having anyone tell me in school, you know, that, you know, making any kind of a remark or anything like that.
How did the teachers treat you?
Well, the teachers treated us fine. In fact, I'll not forget that, like I mentioned earlier, I used to love to sing, and and I must have been like in the 5th grade. Had to be in the 5th grade, and they were going to put on an apparatus. I don't know whether you're familiar with that. Anyway, so it was a story about Native Americans, Indians, and it was a beautiful story. The name of it was Dawn Boy, and they had selected a different cast to perform, and they had the day performance and the evening performance. And so I was the one that was selected. Well, I was performing the Indian girls part, and the one that was performing the Don Boy was he was an Anglo, and in fact the other two were Anglos. I was the only Mexican in that cast. In the main characters. Now they had selected different ones to be like, they had built a teepee and all of that, and so that they could be mingling, you know, and you know, like women were doing something. Well, they were all, not all of them, but there were some Mexicans in the cast in that part, not saying anything. And of course, when it was the choir, the whole choir singing, well, they would also sing. But to perform or to have the leading parts, you know, I was the one that was selected, and so it was time to select who was gonna be in the cast for the evening performance. Well, I was selected to play the part of the Indian girl. And that meant a lot to me, because I, you know, I wasn't used to anything like that before. And in fact, many years later, while working, I met up with the the boy that played uh, opposite the one that played in my performance, uh, and we were talking about that, and he was saying, isn't that something? After all these years that we run across each other, but anyway, so since I always enjoyed singing, I got into when I went into junior high, I went into the choir. I started singing in the choir there, and on to high school, I belonged to the Glee Club. And so of course, they had in high school they had their clubs, and we had ours. Uh, there were two clubs that were the only ones that belonged were the Mexicans. One of them was Los Habladores, and the reason it was named like that, it was a little parrot was our little mascot. He was a little parrot, and they talk all the time. And then the other was El Arcoíris, and so some of us belonged to one, and others belonged to the other, and we just, you didn't see any red jackets, that was the marching group and all of that. You didn't see any Mexicans in that. You didn't.
And you mentioned the Glee Club.
Mhm.
Were there many Mexican Americans in the Glee Club? Were you the only one?
Well, while I was the only one. Yes, and maybe only because I don't know. Maybe the teachers recommended me. I don't know, but I most of my friends went either for art or for some other kind of. But I always enjoyed music, so I went out for that, and uh, I I don't know. Like I say, they had their clubs, and uh, not you had to be invited to belong.
Mm-hmm.
And
And was this already at Austin High?
yes,
Uh-huh.
at Austin High.
Mhm.
At Austin High.
After Austin High, where did you go?
I went to Nixon Clay Business College. I went there, and I always wanted to be a secretary, a typist. That was my ambition in life. I wanted to do that, so I went. Of course, I took typing in junior high, and then I took typing in high school, but I went there, and of course I learned the whole bit. I mean, there you didn't go just for one thing. So and from there my very first job was with the state health department, and I felt very good about that, because they sent me to I went to the employment office, and uh, they send me to the Capitol, to the comptroller's office, and they said, we have this opening. I mean, we're going to send you to this job for an interview. And so at that time, it was Mr. Colbert that was he was the head man there, and so I told him. He saw my resume that I had and all, and so he said, Teresa, I would hire you right now, but you see these little ladies that are here, they came with a building, and they're not going anywhere. So he said, maybe if there's ever an opening, we can contact you. I said, well, that's okay. So I went back to the employment office, and they sent me to the state health department, and that was my first really what I can consider as my first real job that I had. And I was a typist. I was a typist. What I wanted to do, I went in there as a typist because they had that opening, and I worked there until from 45 until Mr. Casarez decided that we needed to get married. And at that time, couldn't work anymore for the health department if you were married. So I quit there in January of 48. Cause mhm.
Were there other Mexican Americans?
There
at the
was
health
one
department?
there was one other one that had come in and was working in another area there. But she and I were the only two. And then after I had been there a little while, I there was an opening, and I called my close friend that had also graduated and was selling popcorn at the 5 and 10 at Crest 5 and 10. Yeah, because she couldn't find a job anywhere. And I told my supervisor, I said, I know of somebody that would love to come and try out for this job. And so they hired her. And after that, more came.
So were you the first, or
No, I consider that probably Grace must have been the first. I was the first in my area, but she worked in another area, but for the health department there on 5th Street across from we were in the building right across from the fire station on East 5th. That's where we were. Mm-hmm.
Did you experience any discrimination since you were Mexican
Do you
American?
know that for some reason I never felt it? I think that we had a good boss, and the women were all real friendly. They were real friendly, and I cannot say that I felt being discriminated against. I cannot say that.
Let's switch to the war years, and what were you doing at the moment when you heard that the U.S. entered the war?
Well, we it was a Sunday afternoon, and go to the movies, and we were getting out of the movies, my girlfriend and I, and we heard all this commotion, and people said that there was a bombing in Pearl Harbor. Of course, we didn't even know what Pearl Harbor was, and we hurried home, and then, of course, my there was a little radio. My brother-in-law had a little radio, and he turned it on, and he and they were talking, and he had it in Spanish, and of course the news of got to Mexico after, I don't know how much later than they got here to the United States. But I distinctly remember sitting in my homeroom in junior high school when the president declared war. We had been in class, and then they said for everyone to go to their homeroom, and so they said that the president was going to speak, and I definitely remember that. And that was in Ellen Junior High. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What did you do during the war years?
Well, like I said, I worked. I started working when I was about 13 years old. There was a 5 and 10 on East 6th Street named Heg 5 and 10. And I had been to Corpus the summer before, and my sister, Pauline's sister-in-law, worked in a department store there, and she said, "Would you like to go work?" And so that's when I started working over there in a department store. It had everything in it, men's clothing on one side, dresses, shoes, material, anything you wanted. And so I went and asked for a job, and he hired me. It was a Jewish owned department store. It was named Grossman Brothers. It was on Leopard Street, the main street on Corpus Christi there in uptown. Anyway, so when I don't know, I just decided I'd go in that 5 and 10 and see if they would hire me. And I told them that I had worked, and so they so he said, "Well, come on Saturday." And there was another Mexican woman working there that had worked there for a little while, and so she was already married, and he said, "You go with Minnie, and she is going to tell you what to do." Well, she did. She trained me. She said, "This is what you need to do." And of course, first of all, I just made sure that the merchandise were on the counters, because in those days, the 5 and 10s had everything on the counters, and I made sure that there was everything there. And in those days, 6th Street was swarming with soldiers from Fort Swift, Camp Swift. It was solid with soldiers there, and I only worked on Saturdays. That's when I worked. And
what did you do with the money that you made?
Okay. Well, with the money that I made, well, I'd go in at 8 o'clock, and then I would work till about 10 o'clock. We wouldn't close till 10 o'clock, and because there was a lot of traffic in the street, and I'd get paid $2. A lot of money for me, because I think, I have some spending money for school and all. And then, would you believe what I'd do? I would tell my parents to meet me outside of the store, and when I got out, we would go to get a hamburger, and then we would go to the Mexican movies, because they start the midnight show. We did not have Mexican movies during the day. We had them at midnight on Saturday nights at the Capitol Theater.
And could you go to other movies during the daytime?
Oh yes, I could go. We could go, but there was no money. But I mean, if we had the money, we would go. We'd go to the State or the Paramount, or But for my parents, that was their only entertainment.
And that was at midnight.
At midnight on Saturday night. Here, every Mexican in town was there. They would, the street, and no cars, no nothing, so everybody walked. 6th Street was solid with people walking. You weren't afraid, because everybody was coming back from the show, and in bunches, And we'd wait, and when that last, when the movie was over, the one in English, well, they'd get out and they'd look and, see everybody just mobbed out there. But so that meant that the show would start at midnight, and they called it the midnight show. And we didn't get home till about maybe 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. But that was on Saturdays, But first I used to treat them to a hamburger and to that movie, which didn't leave very much, but, I made sure that they had that. Hmm.
And you were still in middle school at this time?
I was
When you
in
were
the
working at the project
I
center?
was in I was yeah I was still at Allen when that happened, and then and then when I went on to Austin High, then we had uh, at that time I started working downtown. Uh, I got a job downtown uh, at uh, at one of the stores downtown. I was going to mention also that one of the teachers that I had in junior high, her name was Miss Belger. She knew that I was in need, and so she um, made sure that I had a job. The government was paying. We were called student aids to help them uh, check the test papers and things like that. 25 cents an hour. That was a lot of money for me, anyway. And so I did that. And when I went on to Austin High, then my Spanish teacher there, Miss Vera Lee Moore, she also got me as a student aide. And at that time, I was making big money because I was making 50 cents an hour, helping her grade papers and doing any kind of job that she needed, type in whatever she needed, and so that really helped me. And it was well, I was just happy that I was able to get those jobs because they did help. Everybody went home, and I stayed there, but that was okay,
And what
because
did you do with that money?
well, that money, well, see, by that time I was in junior high, and they had the cafeteria there, and I didn't I didn't I didn't have to take my lunch. Uh, I didn't have to I didn't have to take my lunch every day. I could buy lunch once in a while, and then I'd ride the bus. Had money to ride the bus to go to school. And
Was Austin High very far from your house?
yes, because they're on 12th and Rio Grande. The building is still there. That is an ACC building now. And I used to live. I used to live on lived on 6th Street, 1401 East 6th, and from there, my parents moved in 19. I think it was 1940. My brother had gone into the service already. They moved right after. Must have moved in 42. They moved to uh, 3rd Street, and so it was a distance to walk. So we'd ride the bus, and we transfer there on Congress and 6, and then it bring us down, and sometimes we'd walk, but it was a long walk. Mm-hmm.
Ms. Joanne Sanchez. Today is Friday, October 13th, 2000. I'm at the home of Theresa and Pete Casarez, and we are, this is take 2 of Theresa's interview, and we are interviewing her for the U.S. Latino and Latina World War II Oral History Project, and running the camcorder is Christopher Snickers Harrington, and I appreciate his taping this and also Theresa participating. The last time, Theresa, we ended up we were talking about you're taking the bus to Austin High, and we were still talking about the war years. Um, and I would like to know what other things did you do during the war? You'd mentioned your 5 and 10 job early on. Um, what else were you doing during the war years?
Well, something that I recalled after we spoke was while working at the 5 and 10. As I had mentioned, it was during the war, and one of the things that came to mind was that uh, anytime we sold a tube of toothpaste, we had to have the empty tube back, because in those days they were made out of metal, and we could not sell a tube without getting that, because that went in, that had to go back because it was recycled for the war effort. And I remembered that, and after talking to you, how we had to do that. And also I remember that I was told that if anyone wanted to purchase a bottle of witch hazel, that I had to get their name and their address. Of course, I never did understand why, because I never did know what witch hazel was. And so later on, I found out that some people used to drink that, you know? Yes. And that came to mind after we spoke the other day. I was thinking, those little things that you know, that happened that I had not thought about before. And I had mentioned that after working at the 5 and 10, and then I went on to high school, I was able to get a job downtown at Spiegel's. Now, that is the catalog company, and I think it's still in existence, but at that time, we had a little store uh, between 6th and 7th on Congress Avenue.
Mhm.
And it was a ready to wear, ladies ready to wear only. And I used to work on Saturdays there. I was able to get a job there and work on Saturdays, so that really helped me out financially. And the people that worked at the store were very kind to me. They really were, and they knew that I needed the job. So I'll never forget that when I graduated, they gave me a real nice gift. And um, as I had mentioned, I used to ride the bus to Austin High because it was quite a distance to be able to walk that far. And I always felt good because I had the money to ride the bus with. And Austin High was, um, I guess I'll always treasure that place because I made a lot of friends there. And when I went to elementary school, uh, they were limited. The Mexican Americans were limited. As I had mentioned earlier, it was an Anglo, Palm School district was an Anglo populated area. And so uh, the students that were there, uh, very few of them uh, mingled with anyone else but with each other. We were just maybe a handful. And so when I went on to junior high from there, I made friends that were going to Zavala School, which was predominantly Mexican.
Mhm.
And then some that came from Met School. Now that was another Anglo uh, an Anglo area, and very few Mexican Americans there. So from junior high on to high school, uh, we were good friends, and some of them didn't finish school. Some of them dropped out after going into high school. They did not continue school. There were just very few of us. When I graduated, we were three Hispanics, and so
Out of how many in your class do you have
well,
any idea?
it was a big class. I think there were 500 and something class, and the graduation was held at Gregory Gym at the University of Texas.
What do you remember the year?
Yes, 1945,
Okay, right.
May of 1945,
Uh-huh.
and so some of the friends that I had made in junior high uh, that went on to Austin High. We still remain friends now. Maybe we don't see each other very often, but we still talk about old times whenever we do see each other. And as I said, I felt that I was very fortunate that I was able to graduate because I was the first one from my family to graduate. And my mother she always, I'm not going to say pushed, but she encouraged, you know, that I continue school, and I was eager to. So, like I say, I just feel fortunate that I was able to graduate because that was really something. Because that graduation helped me to open another door. Uh, I had mentioned earlier that, well, as Pete mentioned about us getting married, we got married in 1948, but before we got married, that I worked for the health department, and that was my first true job. And at that time, we were living with his parents, and the LULAC were very active at that time. I was a member of the council, and they were trying to encourage someone to work at the polls, and so at that time, Carlos was a baby, and this was like in 1950, and they had to have somebody to work at the polls that had graduated from high school. Well, we were so limited, Hispanics were, Mexican Americans were very limited in having graduated from high school. There were some that graduated before I did, but most of them had gone into teaching or had left town. So some of the members of the LULAC spoke to me and said, would I consider going and working at the polls at Palm School? Because there had never been a Hispanic working there before. And I said, yes. He said, well, we don't know what you're gonna face. We don't know. And but we'll take you down there. So I was the day that of the election, I was taken down to Palm School, which was located on East First and East Avenue, what is now considered the frontage road. The building is still there, but it's occupied by um, offices of, I don't know whether attorneys, or I know veteran services are there, and I don't know what else is there at this time. But so the one in charge came and greeted us at the door, and he was very courteous, very nice, and he introduced me to the ladies that were already there. And most of them had been there for years and years and years. And they were very courteous. They you know, they accepted me, I guess, when I walked in there. And one of them mentioned that there was coffee and, and cake in the bag if I wanted some at any time. And then the man in charge told me what I needed to do. And so I went ahead and I started as the voters came in. I went ahead and I did what I was supposed to do and all. And and then it was, I'd say, around maybe 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and this little lady came in, dressed with her little old hat and her little gloves. And so she saw me sitting there and she said, "My, what is this world coming to? A Hispanic working, no, not Hispanic, a Mexican working at the polls." And so I said, "Yes, ma'am, and I hope that many more will follow me." That's what I responded. And she didn't say anything else. She went and spoke to the other ladies, and after that, that was the only incident. And after that, I worked during the elections there um, until we moved to South Austin, because at that time you had to live in the precinct where you worked. Now I understand you can work in any precinct, and so I definitely remember that incident. And after I left, of course, others took over. Then my sister worked there for many years, and came on to work at Becker School here in South Austin, and then here at Dawson Elementary. I worked there several times.
Any other incidents?
No, that was my only incident, and that's why I can say that I was warned that there might be something said, and in a way I can understand, because like the man in charge, which he was very kind. His last name was Booth. He said, if any of these ladies say anything, he said, it's just because they've been here so many years and it's just been them and that's it. And an outsider, maybe it could have been an Anglo, but if it was a younger person going in there, they might have treated the person the same, with the exception of the little old lady. But I remember that as an incident.
And you mentioned that this was through LULAC.
Through LULAC, yes.
You were a member of.
I was
of
a member
LULAC.
of the ladies' council, yes.
And what kinds of activities was LULAC involved in? What activities were they doing at that?
Well, they were promoting LULAC as so today. They were promoting education. They wanted the Mexicans to be educated, and they pushed that. And they also worked towards. There were areas that I know that they were not welcomed at. This never happened. This never happened to me and to any member in my family, but it happened to some. That Barton Springs had there was like a pavilion there, and they had dances during the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And I know one of their biggest dances was on the 4th of July. And I never went to any of those dances, but it was said that some of the people that showed up on 4th of July were asked to leave because they were Mexican. And so LULAC was trying to uh, get the people to be able to be accepted in different places, in different areas, and so they worked hard for that. And I too must say that they gave me a scholarship to go on to business school. When I went on to business school, they gave me a scholarship, and they always looked for students that were eager to go on to school, and they were trying to help them out so that they would. Most of them came from very poor families, and they couldn't afford to send them to school, so they helped in that manner.
Now, let's go back to the war years again, and let's talk about what else you were doing during the war in terms of what you were doing at Camp Swift.
Okay. Um, well, I would like to mention about the rationing.
Okay.
You know, I remember that um, because at that time, I remember sugar was rationed, shoes were rationed, and gas was rationed, and we had to have stamps to be able to buy sugar and shoes and of course gasoline. And I remember that we'd have to save the stamps, and you know, uh, they would issue so many depending on the members of the family. And of course, since I was the youngest and I was trying to go to school and trying to work, my sisters would give me stamps so that I could buy my shoes.
Mm.
Yeah, because whatever I needed in shoes, they provided the stamps so that I could have some. And then of course the sugar. I remember my mother. Oh, I tell you, we were not what you'd call uh, sweet eaters, but there was always something sweet because she did bacon. She did a lot of bacon as far as cookies, and never she never baked cakes, but cookies of different kinds and pastries. She did that, and of course there wasn't too much worry about gasoline because we didn't have a car. And I do remember that though, that some of the families, that did have an automobile where they suffered a little bit because of the gasoline. And I wanted to mention also that during the high school years, and in fact that was when I met Pete. I I used to belong to a club that we used to have by the name of the Blue Horizon.
Uh-huh.
We met at this uh, same place that I told you that was named. It was Pan Am Center prior to the one that's existing now. But it was called. We used to call it the Comal Center. And Roy Guerrero, I don't know whether you're acquainted with him. He's the one that Guerrero Connolly Senior Center is named after. He was the man in charge of that of the programs there, and so it was mostly girls because the boys were already starting to leave to go into the service, and it was mostly girls and younger boys. I mean, the boys that would come were younger than the girls, and but we used to meet, and uh, we would dance. We Girls would dance with girls because there weren't enough boys to go around, and we with records. And it was a very orderly thing. I mean, if parents knew we were going there, they didn't worry because they knew it was like a family place. And we had this friend that had a little band, and he used to come and play for us once in a while, maybe on a Friday, maybe every month or every 2 months. So that was really a big dance, and we just used to meet on Sunday afternoons and just enjoy ourselves. There wasn't anything to do. It was either that or going to the movies, you know. But and so I met a lot of friends through that little club, and in fact, that's where I think I met Pete. And he went on to the service, and when he came back, some of the women had already, ladies, well, girls had already married and moved out of town, and some of them still, we still were hanging in there, and we used to have watermelon parties and different kind of things like that. No money involved, hardly, and those were good times, and uh, we what we did for entertainment for ourselves. We were not whatever we did was uh, for our own entertainment and not for others. It was just a little group because we didn't have anything else, so and no money, so we made a good time out of anything. And I was going to mention that we, through the years, starting at Zaragoza when I used to belong to the fiestas, and then going to, from there, going on, belonging to the little club and going on to high school, we uh, had a little dance group that started in Zaragoza that Nelda Guerrero, Roy's sister, used to teach, and she used to pick me up and take me to the playground, and she used to teach me dancing, and so I loved it, and so during the time that that there was nothing that we could do but try to help others. This good friend, Alicia Munguia, that was a University of Texas student, and several University of Texas students formed this group that would go and entertain in different places. And we had singers and dancers, and my friend and I, my friend Cani Candelas and I were the dancers, and we used to dance at the university, or we go. The troupe would go to Camp Swift, and or to the USO, and to entertain. And she she was the head of that troupe, and she had a beautiful voice, and everybody loved to hear her sing, and so we came in um, to this troupe because her father and my friend's dad were good friends, and I guess he must have told him that Connie and I enjoyed dancing, so they worked us in there because we were not University of Texas, Uh, as I said, the others that belonged to the group were, and we dances the typical the jarabe and las chapanecas, la sandunga, uh, just about any kind of dance that that was typical at that time. And I do recall that for every dance we had, it was a different costume. We did not use the same kind of costume the way the folklorico dances now. They wear these beautiful costumes, but they can dance several dances with each costume, whereas we, every time we had a different dance, it was a different costume. And I go back to my sister Frances. You know, she used to make my costume, and my friend's mother, uh, Miss Cantu, used to make hers, and so um, we were always happy to go and perform wherever we were asked.
What was it like for your family to have two brothers in the war? How did that affect your family?
I uh, I distinctly remember that when my youngest brother went in first, he was just older than I, and it was a terrible blow. Of course, everywhere in the neighborhood, the boys were going. I mean, families of three and four, uh, you know, all the boys were being drafted, and of course, some were volunteering, but so many of them were just being drafted. So it was really a big blow because, like Pete said, it was always we were always like a family. You know, we were always together. There was not you didn't hear about people traveling the way we do today, and so. Uh, I remember my oldest, well, my mother, of course, all of us. And my oldest sister, she just used the day that he had to go to report, she just hung on to him and hung on to him. And I said, oh, Lord, we all missed him. So we already missed him. He hadn't even left. But anyway, it was very hard for us. And he went to San Antonio, and then he went into the Air Force, and he was gone for quite a while before we heard from him, and he served in the Pacific, and he used to write very seldom. And as Pete mentioned before, whenever he'd write, sometimes the letters would come in little pieces, because if he didn't mention anything, they would censor the letters that they were written on like onion skin paper, very fine. And of course, my parents couldn't understand that, how we got these letters. And you know they uh my mother and father, my mother could read a little English, but she could not read, she could not make out in some of the letters that were written. And my father, he could read very little, very limited, only because they both learned how to read it, because they went to school to get their citizenship, and at that time they had to take the exam in English. And my mother, and I guess my father also, but mostly my mother, knew more about the history of this country that I did, even though I learned it in school. I mean, they were very they were very proud that they were able to go and to pass this exam in English, and so when my brothers served, they knew that they were going because they had to defend this country. And so my youngest brother, which was Raul, uh, thanks be to God, he went and served his time, and then he came back home okay. And of course, uh, he he was one of the lucky ones, because a lot of his friends that went that were his age. Some of them didn't come back. Some of our neighbors didn't come back. And my oldest brother, Abdon, which people call Phoebe, and for some reason they called my brother Raul Ralph, and nobody knew him as Raul. They knew him as Ralph, and Abdon, everybody called him Phoebe, and I don't know where he got that name, but anyway, he went. He was in the army. He had 5 children, and he was drafted, and he was in the D-Day in the Normandy invasion, and from there he went to the Rhine, but also we did not hear from him, you know, for a long time, and today it is so different of a person being in the service because they have the email, they have the access to the telephones, and in those days I really don't know uh, how the parents were able to stand not hearing from their children, not knowing where they were, and 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 me as a sister, I know how bad I felt about it. I just couldn't comprehend why we could not hear from them. And when we did, like I say, many times the letters were censored, and so we got parts of it. But it was good just to get the letter, no matter what, no matter if it was in pieces. And of course, my mother, as well as I know Grandma Casarez and all the mothers, they waited for that mailman every day. They waited to see if there was anything there. And I distinctly remember that you'd go by the homes, you'd drive by the homes in the neighborhood, because I lived at 1303 East 3rd, which is in the same block as Pete lived in the 1100 block of East 9, but we were in the same neighborhood. And you'd go by the houses and you'd see these little flags that were on the windows. And if a family had a son, it had one star. If they had 2 sons, no matter whatever sons they had in the service, that's the amount of stars that were on the little flags. And they hung on the windows. So everybody knew this family has 2 sons up there, this one has 1, this one has 4, and I don't know, I think that the war matured me, and it matured the people in my generation very much, because that was a big blow, and uh, we learned to do without, and we already didn't have much to start with, but we did learn to do without things that we never had dreamed that we would, due to the war.
Did you ever go hungry?
No, I cannot say that ever went hungry. No, wasn't the food that we had on our table was it was simple food. We never had much meat in my house. There never was much meat, but then most homes didn't have it either. There were some that did, but the majority of the homes, they didn't have meat on their table. And so, but I cannot say, because my mother always, she provided. I know that we always had beans and rice and fideo and vegetables of some kind, but meat, we seldom had meat. Mhm.
Where were you, or what were you doing when you heard that the war was over?
my friend and I had gone to the movie at the state theater, and we just, the movie was over and we walked outside, and there was all this commotion, and we didn't know what it was. We didn't know what it was, and people, the cars were honking, and people were, you know, people on top of the cars, and we didn't know what it was, what had happened. And so then we asked, and somebody said, "Well, the war is over." And I said, "Oh, thanks be to God." And so we hurried home. We hurried home, and to tell the news to those that weren't aware of it, because some people had radio, some people did not. You know, and the news came to the families by way of radio. Because no one had. Not everyone had a radio. Uh, my brother-in-law had bought a radio for my sister Frances, and so everybody would crowd around that radio, and we'd hear the news, and so those families that didn't have radios didn't even know what was going on, especially those that lived in the neighborhoods, unless somebody went and told them. And so that day was something uh, that I'll never forget that day. And I'm sure that anybody that experienced it hasn't forgotten it either. And then, of course, the war is over. So parents thought their sons were coming home right away. And it took a while. It took a while for them to get back. They didn't come home right away. And so but just knowing that they were at peace, and that we didn't have to be worrying about knowing that any more of the boys were getting killed, because it was a very sad situation, very sad when they bring the bodies home. Of course, that's in another phase. But anyway, um, we were so excited, but then not knowing how many had died the day that, before the peace was signed. Not knowing who was returning home and who wasn't. And so I I feel like the people in my generation, if they had anybody in the service, they probably felt it different than those that didn't have anyone in the service. I mean, they had a different kind of a feeling toward it, because even though they realized that there was a war, and that it was, uh, that uh, there was fighting all the time, unless they had someone in the service, they could not understand the feelings that the families that did have their sons in serving felt. Mhm.
Now, after the war, um, you were when were you working? Because and what was it like to be a woman and a Mexican American, working in the 40s and the 50s, um, when not too many women were working outside of the home? How did you do the juggling and
Okay, well, as I mentioned earlier, my first job was with the state health department, and uh, I had mentioned that I had gone to apply at the comptroller's office, and what I was told, I don't know whether it was because uh, the fact that there was not an opening, or because I was Mexican. I mean, but I took whatever they said to me And I figured, well, maybe there'll be another job later on. But then when I started working at the state health department, when I went in, um, it was, they were all Anglo, except for this one person but she didn't work in my area. But they were very, very, very courteous. My, uh, my boss was a very nice person, and he made me feel at home right away. And then I worked with some women that whose husbands had been in the service, and we started communicating. And although I wasn't married, but I had my brothers in, and so they were all real friendly towards me. I did my job. I went in as a typist because I I had wanted to be a typist all the time. Of course, when I went to business school. I trained for the bookkeeping and accounting and all of that. But that was my thing, and I and I worked for the crippled children's division of the state health department, and they were all very kind. I cannot say that any of them made me feel uh, as I was being discriminated against at any time. Uh, the women I worked with were of all different ages. Worked with one woman that she had just lost her husband, and another woman that her husband was still in the service and he was waiting to come home. And then I worked with I'd say about 5 or 6 single women. But they were just very, very polite. They didn't, you know, we didn't mingle except at work. And so, I cannot complain about my job there.
Let's shift and talk about. You had mentioned meeting Pete, and he had mentioned your letters that you had
Mhm.
written to him. Let's talk about your marriage, your
Okay.
family.
Okay. Well, I met him, and of course, when he came on leave, he wanted for me to get married. And I said,
Oh.
I'm not ready to get married yet, So, anyway, I used to write to him, and then when he came back, uh, we started seeing each other for a while, and then he wanted to get married, and I wasn't ready to get married. But anyway, we did get married on February the 8th, 1948, and we had a very nice wedding. At that time, the weddings were held in the home. We married in Our Lady of Guadalupe Church, and then his mother, his family had prepared a meal, and they invited and we invited some of the close friends, since the reception was at the home, and Gene baked our wedding cake.
He didn't
Yes,
tell
he
me
did.
that.
God bless him, huh? But anyway, so we lived with his parents for about 4 years before we were able to move into our little home here in South Austin. And one thing that Pete mentioned that he really didn't go into much detail about was one of the traditions of his mother, of his family. This came before with his grandmother, and it had been passed down um, through the generations that at Christmas time they had what they called an acostada. of the Niño Dios, of the baby Jesus. They had a baby Jesus that belonged to his mother's mother, and what she would do on Christmas Eve every year, the family would get together and pray a rosary, and she had in advance prepared under the Christmas tree like an little altar, and and it had the baby Jesus and Mary and Joseph, the little statues, and uh, they kept this baby Jesus, the little statue. They kept it in a glass cage all year long. Well, at Christmas Eve, when they would take him out, they would take his little clothes off, and they would just lay him there in the little manger that she had prepared. And after the rosary, of course, we had hot chocolate and pan dulce, and then he would the altar would remain there under the Christmas tree until January the 6th, which was the feast of the Three Kings, Los Reyes Magos they called it. At that time, Grandma would have what they had padrinos, godparents to the Christ child, and another rosary was said, and people from the neighborhood would come, and the madrina, the padrinos, she would make up a little outfit to put on the Christ child for the coming year. So she'd make it with a beautiful little beautiful material and little cap and everything. He was clothed just, and Grandma had a little chair that had been passed down. And then after we got through with the rosary and the baby was already dressed up in his little outfit for the next year, they would sit him down on the chair. She would have a tray of colaciones. You know what that is?
No.
Okay. This is a little Mexican candy that you buy in Mexico. It's like a little ball, and it comes in different colors, and she would put that on the tray, that and other little candies, and as everybody we would sing this particular hymn or song that she had for years and years, and people would kneel and come to the to the altar to adore the baby. You'd kiss his little feet, and then you'd get you some candy. and the children were always looking forward to that because that was their thing. After that, she would prepare a meal of some kind, and serve all of the invited guests, and then she would put him back in the little glass frame that she had until the following year. And as of now, I think that Frutoso is the one that has the Christ child statue.
Mm-hmm. What about your children?
Our children, well, Pete being the oldest one, even though we got married first, Pete was the third one in line. There was Frank and Jean, and then it was Pete. But we married before Jean and Frank married. And so Pete was the first grandchild. And of course, everybody just loved him. And I'll not forget this. When before Pete was born, they had a cat. The family had a cat, and they babied that cat. That cat was all over, he'd come and go, and and I'll not forget that Grandpa mentioned that whenever I came home from the hospital, that cat was going. He didn't want no cat inside that house with a new baby in there. So, and that's what happened when brought Pete home. Uh, that cat was gone. They gave it to Grandma's sister, and because he didn't want no cat being around that baby, and so uh, he was a beautiful baby. Of course, all babies are beautiful, right? But anyway, so they really spoiled him as a baby. They spoiled all of my children because they were the only grandchildren that there were. And I remember that after a while that we'd go visit Grandma's sister, Tia Petra. That cat was around, and whenever they'd see us come, he'd go and hide. It was a she. She'd go and hide. She'd run. They couldn't get her out. I guess she hated us. But anyway, then there was Carlos, and he uh, Carlos, I think he grew a little bit before his time because Pete started walking when he was about 11 months old. And then here's Carlos, bald headed, no teeth, and by 8.5 months he was walking. And so they grew up together, and they were real close. They used to sleep in the same bed. They had twin beds when they got older, and I'd go in the morning and find them both in one bed. And then there was Erlinda, the first granddaughter, and what can I say? First granddaughter. So they spoiled her too, and she was 11 months old when we moved to our little house on Old Tor, and that was in 1951. And she was well, what can I say? She was a joy. And we lost a little boy between Erlinda and Veronica. He was an infant. It was another boy. And then there's 10 years between Erlinda and Veronica. And Veronica was born here in South Austin, Notor. Now, going back to Pete has two daughters, Kimberly and Krista. Kimberly is married to Jason, and Jason is in the Air Force, and at this time he's in Germany, and he has been there. They have been there almost 4 years in Ramstein base, and they don't have any children. She calls me often, and they will be coming back to the States, God willing, in April. He'll be stationed in Florida. Krista has 3 little boys, and she lives in Oklahoma, and she's married to John Achilles. I failed to mention that Kimberly's last name is Terrell, and Krista's last name is Achilles. John is the oldest little boy, and then they have Benjamin and a brand new one, Stephen. He's only about 2 months old. And Carlos, he has his oldest child was Carly Marie. Carly Marie is married to Robert Rooney, and she has 3 children. There's Zachary, and then there's Bailey Ann, and Kaylin, and then we have Erlinda has Carlos and Gianna and Alicia. And Veronica's children are Matthew and Roberto. Now, Matthew and Roberto, Veronica lives in Albuquerque, and so does Erlinda, and Carly Marie lives in, right now she's living in Plymouth, Massachusetts. That's where they live. So those are my grandchildren, 9 of them.
How do you think your children's lives have been different than your life?
Well, first of all, I think in one of the ways that I think that it was different or has been different was the fact that we really pushed for them to have an education, and they got educated to where nowadays they have good jobs. I think that that has a lot to do with it. That they saw the need to have some education so that they could have a better life than what we had, and that's what our parents had. And because I need to mention something about our parents, and it's true, I think, with Pete's family as well as mine and most of the Mexican American families. During the war, very few people owned their homes prior to the war. And many families lived 2 or 3 families in one house because of the money situation. Many of them didn't work. And when the boys started coming back from overseas and the service, their jobs helped the parents to be able to buy homes. So most of the homes were bought after some were bought before the boys left, and some were not bought until after they came back. But it was at that time that families decided that paying rent all the time, wasn't getting them anywhere. Now I know that Pete's family, they bought their home before Pete went into the service. Mine, my brothers had gone into the service when my parents bought their home. But I think that was true for most Mexican American families. And I see that with my children that, they started working, and they realized that the home is the important thing. And so they managed to be able to save their money to be able to buy their homes so they wouldn't be renting. And what's different also to me is that I only have 2 Mexican American grandchildren. All of the others are mixed. Pete married an Anglo, and Carlos also, and Veronica married her husband. The father of these boys was part Filipino, so his last name is Filipino, and so that's the name they carry. And so only the 2 girls, or the next 2 girls, are what I consider Mexican Americans. And that's different because in those days you did not intermarry. You know, it was that started happening after the war. Not You did not see people, an Anglo marrying a Mexican. You know, if you saw one, it was a very rare one. But you just didn't see that. And I feel that nowadays there are opportunities for my children are there, and they're taking the opportunities to better themselves and their children. And I think that that's great. No matter where they are, we miss them terribly. Not being around our children, but they're where they're supposed to be, and they're taking care of their children, and so the one that's furthest away, of course, is Carlos. And him marrying someone from Massachusetts was sort of a big blow to us.
Sure. It is October 13th, 2000, and this is tape 3 for the interview with Theresa Casarez. Theresa, you were talking about how your children's lives were different from your life, and so if you want to continue.
Okay, I think I spoke about Carlos's life. I think being that that was really. I think that affected us in a way. First of all, because never having been away from home except on weekends when Pete used to belong he was a helper to the scoutmaster, and the boys used to belong to the Boy Scouts, and they'd take them out on outings, and that was the only time my boys were away from home. And then here comes Vietnam, and Carlos is taken from here, and he goes and lands in Fort Louis, Washington. And then it was sort of strange because to us because he was so far away from home, and then our children never grow up. Mothers always worry about them. And while in his training is when he met Rich Blaine, who is Marianne's, Carlos's wife's cousin. And it was through Rich that Carlos met Marianne by letter. They used she used to write to him, and they kept writing back and forth, and they were 4 buddies that were in Vietnam, and they were real close buddies. Rich, an Irishman, and then Denny Gennady, an Italian from Pittsburgh, and Carlos and Duncan from West Virginia. And when I first had the opportunity to meet Rich and him, I said, well, I could never understand how y'all got together. How? An Irishman and a Mexican and an Italian. And I said, and by the way, what's Duncan? Oh, he's just a hillbilly from the hills, That's but anyway, they always kept together, and it was through Rich that Carlos met Marianne, and they'd ride, and the boys had promised that the first 4th of July they would come and meet in Massachusetts. They'd get together over there. The first 4th of July that whoever came back alive. So that's when Carlos met Marianne, and so when he was going for 2 weeks, and when he came home, he says, "Mom, I think I really like this girl." And I said, "Really, Mom?" And I thought to myself, I've lost him. That's for sure. And he said, "Yeah." He says, "She's real nice and this and that." And so as the days went by, I could tell the phone was ringing both ways. Her mom told me this later. The phone will ring over there and it ring over here. The letters came and all. So then I told Carlos, I said, "Carlos, if you think that this is the girl that you really love," I said, "you really can't tell because you were only around her 2 weeks. You're gonna have to go and be close to her, and if after being there a while you find that she's not the one, well, there's nothing to hold you coming back home." Well, he left and was there, and a year or so later, well, it was after a year, they married, and so that's the reason Carlos is over there. Everybody wants to know, why is he up there? And of course, she being from an Irish family, she had to break the news to her family that they knew Carlos through letters of her cousin, and but they never had met him. They never had met a Mexican. So this story I heard later, that she had to tell her grandmother, which her grandparents came from Ireland and all. He said that that this fellow, that she was interested in him. Well, yes, and well, the grandma had she had heard he was there, but I don't think that she had met him. So I said, "Oh yes," and I think that I'm serious enough that we might get that I might want to marry him. And she said, "Are you sure?" And she said, "Well, yes, I think." She says that I do want to marry him, and so the grandma says, "But I would like for you to give me your opinion." I said, "Well," the grandmother thought a while and says, "Is he Catholic?" And so she said, "Yes, he's Catholic." And she said, "Well, is he a Democrat?" "Yes, he's Democrat." "Does he like the Red Sox?" And she says, "I'm sure he does." "Well, he's okay." That was what Grandma Hannah said. Anyway, but I think that the fact that Carlos lives in Massachusetts, and both daughters live in Albuquerque, we don't get to see each other at the same time. We'll see the girls, of course, they're closer, and then uh, we have been going up to see Carlos once a year. This time he'll be coming down at the end of this month. He'll be coming down, but uh, that that makes it sort of uh, difficult because of the distance between all of us, and so that has been one of the things that I have felt that you know I miss the fact that our children are scattered out, and not only the son and the daughters, but the granddaughters and the granddaughters that are in Oklahoma, and Krista and Kimberly in Germany, and Carly and Peter in Massachusetts. Now Pete lives here. I say here, he lives north of Georgetown. But we haven't been. All the family has not been together since our 50th anniversary, which was in '98. We had all the family together. That had been many years since we had been able. One would come and the other one wouldn't, and that's the way it had been all through the years. But that was the only time that we had all our family together. But we keep in touch by telephone, and uh, we um, we don't forget their birthdays. And we're close, even though it's by phone. We're close. Hmm.
Let's talk a little bit about the 1950s and 60s in LULAC, excuse me, in Austin, and um, how, if there were any racial conflicts that you recall, or how do you think the Chicano movement has affected Mexican Americans? But first of all, let's go back to the 50s and the 60s in Austin, Texas.
Okay.
Were there conflicts that you knew of or heard about, racial conflicts in Austin?
Well, even though we were not involved with any of the uh, Chicano movement, uh, we were not involved. We'd hear about different things because um, for a while, seems like they were tagged as troublemakers. They like they were even though they themselves were probably trying to do something for the Mexican American to open up doors or whatever, but some people considered them being over maybe over demanding or that they were stirring up problems where people were trying to live a peaceful life, and to some people I know that even though whoever had these movements, they were trying to better for the younger generations. Now, I don't much think that the elderly in the 50s or even 60s saw that. They thought that they were troublemakers trying to stir up problems. Uh, but as far as I know, I know that they had marches and things down the avenue and all of that, but we never participated in anything like that. And I know that out of all of that, some good has come out.
What do you think are the positive things that came out of that?
Well, I think that they have fought for like for neighborhoods. They try to make sure that the neighborhoods uh, are better. That those that have been the neighborhoods that have been neglected, that they're trying to see if they can get help to get the neighborhoods to where people will remain in their neighborhoods and not leave them and go to other places because uh, the neighborhoods are run down or or um, or they also feel that the education they're pushing it on and have pushed it in the 50s and from the 50s on up, and they've tried, but as Pete mentioned earlier, some families just, you know, they did not they did not take the warning that the children needed to be educated, that the children needed to be involved, and that they needed to be involved. And I know that even though that some of them consider them radical, that they along the way they have done some good. And they um, there were there's different groups, you know, different groups, and I know that some maybe were striving for one thing, some for something else, and and they probably thought that if they if if they would get, maybe if they would get a little radical, that they would pay more attention to them, which I don't think that was true. But some of them, you know, they right away they tagged them, you know, they're radicals, they're, you know, uh, they a lot of the Mexican Americans didn't want to have anything to do with them, you know, because not all the people were for those movements. Not all of the Hispanic Mexican American families were for those movements, because maybe we didn't understand all of their causes, you know. So a lot of them, I mean, we read about it and all, but then, you know, we didn't quite understand some of the reasons that they were doing some of these things. And if you want to settle something, uh, if you do it in a peaceful way, maybe you will get more of you will get more of a result than you would if they're radicals. And so but that I remember starting from the 50s and the 60s that people were doing that, and those movements, I don't know, some of them are still probably in existence, some probably aren't, because those that used to be the heads of them, a lot of them have passed away, I'm sure. But I do know, for instance, that uh, one of the things I remember distinctly, and since I used to go to Corpus Christi, I have my sister there and all, and this was known throughout. I mean, it wasn't just here, that Dr. Hector Garcia from Corpus, he was very instrumental in trying to get the Hispanic people, the Mexican American, we didn't call them Hispanics, we called them Mexican Americans, to get them to understand the importance of getting out and voting, sending your children to school, making sure that you spoke up for your rights, because he really fought a lot right after the war. He Because a lot of the men that had gone to serve overseas and all, they were denied, they were not accepted in some places. And for instance, that burial that of that soldier, that you know, they would not accept him to be buried in the cemetery in the little small town because he was Mexican. uh, he was a fighter for the Mexican American. And uh, in fact, I know he wrote a book, and I regret that I never bought a copy concerning that. And I uh, causes like that he fought for the Mexican American. He fought for the people. He fought for the men that were coming back from the service very much. Uh, it is well known in Corpus, and well all over.
What would you say are some of the problems that still confront Mexican Americans?
Well, I feel that most of most of the problems nowadays are the lack of education. I feel that they have it all now. They do. They it used to be difficult for us when we went to school because you know a lot of us didn't have what it took to go and buy the supplies and do this. Now they have it all. They have it all, and how and why does does this generation still not inspire to get educated so that they can have a better life than their parents and their grandparents had? Now that to me has always that has always bothered me because they have it all and they'll go to school and they'll drop out, you know, and asking them to go out and vote is like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't have to go vote. Somebody else will vote. They don't realize the importance of your vote. Whether your candidate wins or not, you have cast your vote the way you felt that you should. And why worry about going to the polls, and things like that? And I've never been able to understand that. Uh, why the lack of interest in the political life? Of course, we don't have to be candidates for that, but we do need to understand that the candidates that we choose are going to be working for what we believe in. And I believe that is a problem. That is a problem. The getting them out to vote and getting the children uh, to continue to go to school, because they say that we will be, well, we are probably the Mexican American, the Hispanic as a whole. Uh, we are getting larger and larger and larger in this United States, and that someday that we would probably run this country. But do we have the qualified people to run it? If they don't get educated, they don't understand, and they cannot go and hold a public office if they're not educated. And so how are the Hispanics gonna control the country if they're not educated to where they understand the systems and all of that? That's another thing.
What kind of community activities are you involved in now?
Well, I've been very involved with the Catholic War Veterans Auxiliary. In fact, when I married Pete, I married him and the Catholic War Veterans. I married both of them. He was already the commander of Our Lady of Guadalupe Post 742, which they had formed there, and so I have been very, very active with that organization. And we also do all kind of charity work, and we work for scholarships, and of course the needy. We always help the needy, and we do any and everything that we can to help the people that are in need. And so I have been very, very involved with that. And uh, we um, we try very hard to get other people involved. The organization is very powerful up north. There are many, many departments in the north, Pennsylvania and New York and there. Uh, those are Anglo departments, and the ones that our department in Texas are predominantly Mexican American. We do have a few Anglos that belong to the posts, but you know, very few. And so I I have always been involved in some kind of an activity or another, but that has been my main thing. I was very involved in the school when the children were in school. As Pete said, we belonged to PTA all the way through the years when all of them were in school, and we were involved with the band. Pete was president of the Travis Booster Club, and I was an officer also, and we were very involved with that. Now I get involved with the church also. In fact, I'm going to be working at the the Jamaica here come the last Sunday, Saturday of the month, and we have worked with the church for many years, you know. And I, anytime that anybody asks for any help of anything, well, we've always tried to be there for them.
One thing that I'm not sure that we talked about that I wanted to talk about, and if we did, tell me, but I don't, I'm not sure if we talked about your IRS job and how you juggled
Okay.
from 1968 to 1988. You
Right.
worked at the IRS.
Right. And
how did you juggle doing that and being a mom?
well, first of all, I want to tell you that as I mentioned before, that when we married, I didn't work anymore. I didn't work for 4 years, and after that, I started working for McFarland Refrigeration. I was the one girl office, and that was that was a company that put in all grocery stores, like all the HEBs. They put all the refrigeration in the HEBs and all of the grocery stores in Austin, and they were connected with refrigerators out of San Antonio, and I kept books for them for 13 years, and from there I went on to work for the IRS. I started working there in '68, and my experience that I had with my double entry bookkeeping and my prior school qualified me to work in the accounting branch. And all my years were in the accounting branch, and I I went from one area to the other, but always in the accounting branch. And I I was the work leader for the non-master file unit, which probably doesn't mean anything to you, but those are the documents. When we say documents, are the returns that could not be input into the computers because there were for some reason or another they could not go on the computer. The information could not be uh, put in the computer, so therefore they had to be handled manually. And that's the area that I worked for. That we had the actual taxpayer's return on hand when we were doing anything that concerned that taxpayer's account. We actually worked with the return, whereas the people that were keying in on the computer, everything went on the computer, and and they didn't have the paperwork on hand as we did. And so I think for years they were trying to see if they could work to be able to put those returns on the master file that they call, to put them on the computer and all. And I think they're still working on that. And so that was my area. It was a favorite area because I knew double entry bookkeeping and all of that helped me being there. And I can say that I had some wonderful years there. I enjoyed my work. And when I went in there, there were some Mexican Americans that were working there already at the service center. Some of them had come from the district office or from the valley, from somewhere. There weren't many, but there were some. You could spot them here and there. And so I had some very good days. And what I did, every morning that I got there, I did my job, and in the afternoon, I tried to leave it there.
Mhm.
But I can't. I don't have anything but good memories of working for the IRS. A lot of
Were your
people.
children then already out of the house back then?
Well,
or not?
Pete was already gone, but Carlos he was still here because he didn't go into Vietnam until the war. And the girls were here, and Carlos.
And how did you juggle this?
Well, it was I tell you what, the boys, Carlos and the girls were in school, and they'd work after school, and all four children worked after school, and then I'd go in at 7:30 in the morning. Pete would drop me, and I'd get off at 4 o'clock, and I'd be home before he got home. He used to get off at 5, and so I'd be home and I'd be fixing supper and so it was Monday to Friday job.
Mhm.
And so I was very involved with the Catholic War Veterans Auxiliary at the time I went in there. In fact, I served as state president the year that I went in there, and I was very involved with that. But I somehow I managed to keep up. And I do want to say that one thing that I'm real proud of, that when I did retire, I received the highest award that they present anybody working in accounting. I did receive that award, and for the work that I did through my years there at IRS, and it's not given to everybody, and so that's why I feel proud.
Well, you should be.
Yes.
That's wonderful.
Uh-huh.
What advice would you give to the future generations?
I would say, first of all, in order to get ahead, you need to get educated, and you need to be a responsible person. You need to know that you as a citizen you really have an obligation to your government. Whenever there's an election, go cast your vote, no matter which way you cast it, because you will be speaking for yourself. You're not letting somebody else tell you, well, this is what's happening in the government today, whether it's local or state or national. Or if you have cast your vote, then you have spoken. If you do not bother to go and exercise that right, then you don't have any say so. And I would like to say to to this the youth of this generation that even though we came through, and I'm saying about Pete and myself that we went through World War II and we went through Vietnam. Well, first of all, we went through World War II, the Korean War, and Vietnam, because I have many nephews that served in the Korean War. And in fact, I have a great nephew that's in the Navy, and tomorrow he's going to be in a ceremony in Jacksonville, Florida, because he has been on the Roosevelt, and they built a new Roosevelt, and he is on the first crew that's going into the new ship, and I'm real proud because they're gonna put the names of all of those that are the first members of the first crew. Their names are gonna be put on the ship, and I wish we could have been able to be there. His mother and my niece left day before yesterday, but that ceremony is tomorrow, and I would like to tell the youth that, you know, the service is something that when you go and serve your country, you get a lot in return. You do get a lot in return. And a lot of young men grow up when they go into the service, you know. They learn a lot, and then they come back with a chance to be educated if they want to further their education, and they have many benefits, and they should take advantage of them.
Is there anything else you'd like to add to your interview?
I can't think of anything else except maybe that I do appreciate it very much that you have taken the time, you and Sneakers, to come and hear us out. I really wasn't what I call prepared for this. Maybe if I had sat down and written some things down, maybe I would have had a better interview. But then maybe you didn't want me to be having something that I wrote down. You wanted for me to repeat what came to mind.
Exactly.
And I do feel that the Hispanics that served during World War II should be recognized, because so many of them, I think some of them hardly ever knew how to read and write. But you know, they felt that it was their duty, so they left their home, and maybe all they could do was write their name. But you know, they served with pride. You know, they served with pride, and they should be recognized for that. They should be recognized because they went and served this country. They didn't know what they were going into or anything, but all they knew was that it was their duty, and they went. And even though things we suffered at home, we didn't suffer what they did. And I have I did want to mention one other thing before I forget, and I had mentioned a little bit about it, that at the end of World War II, when they started bringing back the bodies of the boys, Pete was the commander at Our Lady of Guadalupe post at that time, and it was their post that received the bodies of the men that were killed. And it was you know, that shook this Mexican American town. Of course, the Anglos they suffered as well as we did. But just knowing that they were the ones that did this, because we had many neighbors, and at that time they didn't take the bodies to the funeral homes. You had the bodies at home, and so it hit hard because they were the ones that had to go and take the they were the ones that performed the military ceremonies and all, and they went to the homes when it was time to take the bodies out. And of course that was something that can be explained to the families, to know that their son had gone and then he came back home in a coffin. And it was something that I think will always stay with me, because so many of, like I say, so many of the boys that went, that we knew, didn't come back alive. And that went on until they brought all of the boys back, and I tell you what, that's why many people nowadays, when they hear that taps, it just tears them up, because they remember when their loved one was being buried. And every year, that's one thing about the Catholic War veterans. We participate in the parade, in the Veterans Day parade. We participate in that every year, and the ladies sell the poppies, and after the ceremonies, we go and we get together at the post home. Last year they had this first time that they had the Janos in action. They had at that Plaza Saltillo, they honored all World War II veterans, and Pete was selected to be the one to turn over the American flag to the younger generation, which was to someone from the Korean War. And this year they're going to have honor the Korean War veterans. Now, what was so outstanding about that, they went by homes and talked to people to remember all of those that served. So many had already passed away, so they ran a list of all those that had served, that had already passed away from World War II. And that made a big impression on the community. And but World War II is something that I feel sad that they don't teach more about it in the schools. I know that my granddaughters from Albuquerque, they call and say, "Tell me something about World War II. Tell me something, because we're supposed to be studying it, and we don't get enough out of the book." And it's true, and I guess maybe because the books that were written concerning World War II, many of them are not in the school libraries, or not, or the students are not required to read them. Like when we went to school, when I went to school, history. I mean, you knew your history because it was in the book, and the teachers made sure that you knew all about how everything started, from the European history to the Texas history, United States history. I mean, we learned all of that. And because they made sure that we were aware of where this nation was born, how this nation was born, and the all of the immigrants that came to form this nation. And I'm hoping that maybe in the future that they will put more emphasis on World War II, and because they say that that was the war, and I guess it was. Uh, and hopefully, we don't have another war. But the way things are today, it's sad. But you always prayed that we always prayed that our children didn't have to go. They did, and now the grandchildren are going, and so hopefully type of a peace will come to the world, to all the world, uh, to where my granddaughter won't have to be talking about a war to her children.
Mhm. Thank you, Theresa. Thank you very much for the interview.